up, gamers? It's been a long time since we've done one of these officer training school videos, one of the backbones of the channel, but we have recently had something pop up into the popularity and has been being played by a bunch of top players recently. So let's go ahead and talk about why you should be strongly considering Cadian Castellan Bricks in all of your competitive lists going forward. My name is Joushi Howard, and let's get started. So to start off with, we're going to be talking about Cadian Castellan Bricks. One of the big things, I was considering calling this the Cadian Castellan video, but I don't care about the Castellan. The Castellan is a machine that gives my Cadian shock troops fallback and shoot and sustained hits. And you really don't want to be doing much else with the Castellan. It's not really particularly useful in a lot of other ways. And especially at the time of this recording, you really just don't see it in any competitive list outside of being used as part of one of these Castellan bricks. So I'll talk about the Castellan a little bit in its own context, but mostly we're going to be talking about the context in which it is attached to 20 Cadian shock troops and a Cadian command squad. What does it do? It strongly enables using Cadian bricks for early gameplay and combat. One of the big things that we oftentimes talk about in a lot of different lists is you'll have a 20 brick of Cadians attached to Ursula Creed and a Cadian command squad. And this unit is really good for coming out later on in the game, but some players really don't like having that many points devoted to just hanging out in the backfield, and the Castellan is a way that you can use these Cadians in order to start doing damage and playing the early and playing the midboard way faster because they are actually way better in combat. It is worth noting though that this does compete in slot with Ursula Creed, and so it is a way to play the midboard faster with these Castellans. However, it doesn't mean that you should entirely discount the ability to play Creed. Both of them are still very strong options. This is simply a new one. And the other big thing about the Castellan is how good it is with the entire suite of detachments that we have. There's only a couple detachments that you don't really consider using this. It's pretty good in basically everything that's not Hammer of the Emperor. So before I go too far, I do want to say you do not want to attach the Castellan to Kazarkin. This is a question I get a lot. You see it on Reddit from time to time. I'll see it sometimes pop up in my Discord. But to put it simply, the Kazarkin and a Castellan attached to them don't do enough for their points cost. And a big way to think about this is the Kazarkin unit is already so good. It's one of the best skirmishing units in the game. It is incredibly flexible. It's pretty darn good at killing about 5 Marines or sometimes a Taurox or a Rhino. And they don't hit a new tier of good things that they do with the Castellan. They simply do what they already did a little bit better. However, a couple of big things here. One, you lose the scout keyword, so you can't get that extra bit of movement at the very beginning of the game, which is very important in a lot of matchups. And two, we're spending more points to do the same job. This is a little bit different in Mechanized Assault, where you can give them some enhancements, or they are a good second wave of things that you can use in Mechanized Assault, but just about every other detachment in every other context, I would strongly recommend against taking Castellans until something changes. If you're watching this video 6-9 months from now and you're like, oh, but Joushi, the Castellan is really good in the Kazarkin in the detachment that they released for us in 11th edition. It's like, great, the context has changed. This video might no longer be valuable. This video might not be useful in March. We'll see how the points changes go. Anyway, focusing back in on the Castellan brick, again, it is a Cadian Castellan with 20 Cadian shock troops and a Cadian command squad. Typically, you will take the Cadian command squad and you will take the guy that has the chainsword and the last pistol or whatever, you will rip those out and you'll give him a plasma gun. And then you're going to take the guy with a flag and you're going to throw that out and you're going to give him a plasma gun. The Cadian shock troops, you're going to give 2 plasma guns. Some people like to go flamers as the extra weapons in order to have better overwatch into things like elves. However, now that the elf nerf has gone through, you're seeing, again, people going back towards the melta guns as the primary gun. After that, one of the optional things that you can think about is the Ogryn Bodyguard or Nork. It's not necessary, but it is a worthwhile upgrade into your units. A couple for 40 or 60 points, depending on whether or not you want the Ogryn Bodyguard or Nork. It provides a substantial durability boost to the unit, as well as really makes it difficult for your opponent to precision out our characters. Now, why is this popping up all of a sudden? I've been pretty anti-Castellan most of the history that we've had throughout the course of 10th edition. Why is this changing all of a sudden? Well, we first started seeing Cadian Castellans popularized in Recon Element by Wesley St. Hines, aka Nemo the Fish. However, after seeing that for a couple of months, Gustavo de Sousa over in the UK started pushing them really heavily in Combined, where he had some decent success with them locally before taking them to the World Championships of Warhammer in 2025. Since then, it's seen a bunch of podium placings by top players, including myself and David Purcell, so it showcases that the archetype of this unit and the archetype of the general army that you're going to be taking this in does clearly work. As of right now, it's still very powerful in Grizzled Company, but it might not survive the March 2026 status slate. One of the big reasons why this is good right now is because 20 Cadians as one unit cost less than 2 units of 10 Cadians. So your 11th through 20th guy cost 55 points instead of 65 points for the first 10. And adding those extra bodies and the extra special weapons that come along with them does make the unit that little bit better. In Recon and the Gustavo style list, you do have a ton of output coming from these units because you have access to the sustained hits, and then in combined, you also have the lethal hits. When you pair this with Grizzled Company or a Scout Sentinel and you get those reroll 1s, suddenly these Cadian units are putting out a lot more damage and actually able to do quite a bit on their own, even without further support. Nemo first started putting them in his list in Recon when he was noticing that the Cadian bricks that were a big portion of his damage originally were getting tagged when things would charge into the first wave of guys and then consolidate into the Cadian bricks afterwards, and then the Cadian bricks wouldn't be able to shoot. So that's when he started adding the castle and saying, what if I had access to this fallback and shoot? What if I was able to move afterwards and then kill the thing that tagged me, especially if it's smaller units like Chaff or a couple units of jump pack intercessors that were jumping the screens in the first place. Now we're going to be able to deal with those as well as still move effectively on the board at the same time. So with that in mind, one of the things to think about this unit is it is a lot of different things all in the same package. It's going to be doing a respectable amount of damage. It's also going to be soaking up a lot of fire. It takes a lot of attacks coming out from your opponent in order to deal with this unit. It also, because it has so many bodies, you're going to be able to tag a lot of things in swing charges. You're also going to be able to put a lot of OC on different objectives all at the same time. It's a unit that does a little bit of everything, and while it's not exceptional at any of them in comparison to other things that we can take in the Codex, it does all of them at the same time, which is a big deal. So talking about the orders that we give to these units, the first one and the most common one I have found myself using is first rank fire, second rank fire. And you're going to want to do this in most of your shooting phases. Increasing the volume of shots works really well with sustained hits, and it gives you a lot of plasma shots coming out from all of the different plasma guns that you have in the unit. And increasing that volume is really important. So in general, if you're going to be shooting with this unit, you're going to be wanting to give them first rank fire, second rank fire. The primary times where you are going to be giving them a different order is 1, move, 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 or 2, duty and honor. Move, move, move for the extra movement is really important. You don't want to be taking long charges. You don't want to be taking a 7-inch charge when you could give them move, move, move and take a 4-inch charge instead. And then duty and honor is always relevant if it is the difference between you holding a primary objective versus not holding a primary objective. Doing damage is almost always going to be secondary to scoring points. So if either move, move, move or duty and honor are more relevant into getting shots at all, getting some of these charges off, or scoring some of these objectives, you should be giving the order that gives you the primary objectives rather than just doing damage. One of the other major things that you can be looking to do if you're going to be shooting at, say, a small unit of Marines or something that you are expecting to overkill anyway with the volume that you are putting out is take cover. If you're not going to be shooting at all, you should be doing this. However, the other big thing that you could be thinking about is switching into this. Inspired Command is a great way to get these guys from first rank fire, second rank fire on our turn into take cover on our opponent's turn. Rapid Ingressing an Officer does the same thing, or using someone like Gaunt's Ghosts. And then the Snap to It stratagem in Grizzled Company is another great way to get you into the take cover order in the phases that you need it. The other two, Fixed Bayonets and Take Aim, you really very, very rarely use these. Take Aim is almost always worse damage than doing first rank fire, second rank fire, especially considering how many plasma guns we're going to be packing into this unit. So if you're trying to increase the damage, it's not Take Aim, it's almost always going to be first rank fire, second rank fire. I do want to touch briefly on the two new orders that we have in Grizzled Company. The Aquilini target weak spot for a bonus AP is just going to be outcompeted by first rank fire, second rank fire if you have, so you should generally be going with the default orders. And then the Spec Ops Veteran, Move to the Shadows, still also going to be almost always worse than Take Cover. These are both orders that you would think about if you have a Ursula Creed unit where they can have two orders at the same time, where the stealth order plus take cover is obviously better than just take cover, and then first rank fire, second rank fire plus the target weak spot combination of orders does generally do more damage than first rank fire, second rank fire, and take aim. So if you have other good uses for this order in the rest of your army, you can consider doing it here as well. Next, let's talk about the stratagems, and we're going to be going over a couple of the most important ones that we can do based on the detachments that I have seen this have the most success. First one is combined arms. In Fields of Fire, this is one of the best things in your army that you can use Fields of Fire on. Very often when you're using Fields of Fire with an army that has Ursula Creed, she will point at her own unit that's not going to be shooting at all, and then you'll also point at a tank and give it bonus AP. However, in this kind of army where you're taking the Castellan Brick, where the Cadians are actually going to be on the front line, suddenly you're getting that second unit. You're going to be getting the Cadian Castellan Brick as well as a Rogel Dorn shooting at the same thing, and giving 2 units bonus AP is very cool. It's one of the main ways that you can pump out extra damage with this unit. The other one that you oftentimes see is reinforcements. It's a decent reinforcements target for the 20 Cadians when they do die, but they are competing in slot with things like Kazarkan. However, as we'll touch on later, each subsequent 20 brick that you bring does make you more durable to the way that your opponent plays. And so sometimes having that extra unit of 20 dudes is more important than having the Khazarkin, which are a little bit more compact. Next, going into the new detachment, we have Grizzled Company. And the two main stratagems that you'll find yourself using on this unit are one, Purging Fire for lethal hits, where you do need to be touching an objective, but you give the entire unit lethal hits. So suddenly you have all the benefits of combined arms with the lethal hits into all infantry targets, but now you can get them into any target that you want, and you get the benefits of the Grizzle Company where you're re-rolling ones without the help of a Scout Sentinel. And 14 plasma shots with lethal and sustained hits into anything is going to do damage. The opponent is really going to need to respect. The other one is additional armor, aka Armor of Contempt. Now, remember that the Cadian Command Squad, as long as the officer is alive in that unit, gives the rest of the unit cover while it is touching an objective. You combine this with a Take Cover order, and then Armor of Contempt to worsen the AP by 1 is basically the same thing as what we're getting from Recon Element. So this unit not only does a ton of damage in Grizzled Company, but also is a lot harder to remove than our opponent might expect due to the fact that it has access to Armor of Contempt. In Recon Element, the detachment that we first started seeing this unit pop up, Draw Them Out and Tanglefoot Grenades as a combination of stratagems is incredibly powerful. You move 6 inches away and then you give the opponent -2 to charge. It's very important that because this unit makes up such a large part of your damage, preventing the unit from getting charged is extremely vital to the way that the army actually plays. If you want more information on that, I would strongly recommend going to check out many of the videos that I've done on Recon Element over the past several months. The other stratagem in Recon Element that you find yourself using more often than you might expect is the Crack Shot stratagem, whereby you give every ranged weapon in the unit the precision keyword. And this stratagem wins a few matchups automatically because you can dump Plasma and Melta shots into characters like the Technomancer in a unit of Wraiths or a Dark Commune attached to Accursed Cultists. It doesn't come up in every game, but it is very powerful. The other one that I really want to pay attention to is Siege Regiment, which is not a detachment that I'm expecting a lot of people to be playing in competitive environments. However, it is important to talk about the fact that Flare Burst and Furious Fusillade gives you access to full reroll hits with sustained, extra attacks from weapons within half range, so each Melta gun can be shooting 2 Melta shots with full reroll hits and sustained. And you'll just do a lot of damage to anything in the game just with the raw volume of shots that you're putting out. The other one that's surprisingly useful is Trench Fighters. Because all regiment keyworded models get +2 to the fight on death roll, if you get charged by something like Jane Czar or Lycus, you're going to get a lot of attacks right on back into the unit, which can oftentimes be enough to trade back into the enemy unit in ways your opponent might not have been expecting. Lastly, the generic stratagems that any army can use that I really want to focus in on are Rapid Ingress and Heroic Intervention. The first one, Rapid Ingress. Very often you're going to be taking one Cadian Castellan Brick, you're probably going to be taking a second. You don't have to, but it is very powerful. And you will oftentimes find yourself putting one of these Cadian Castellan Bricks in reserves. By coming in from Rapid Ingress, this gives you access to a couple of things. One, the Rapid Ingress into Overwatch combination with a lot of extra shots coming out from Plasma is something that we used to do with Scions fairly often. And now, especially in Grizzled Company, where we are re-rolling once to hit, it becomes a thing again with this unit. The other thing that Rapid Ingress allows you to do is give orders on your opponent's turn from a Cadian Castellan unit. Now, normally this unit is going to be giving out 3 orders if you're playing any other detachment than Grizzled, but if you are in Grizzled, you can come in and give out 5 orders. And if you were to do this and give Take Cover onto 3 or 4 other units in your army, that can seriously change the math that your opponent was expecting to do in terms of units they are expecting to kill. So this is something that you can definitely look to coordinate with things like Rough Rider charges or having your other Cadian Castellan Brick out in the open, where suddenly it's going to be getting an extra pip of armor. The other big one is Heroic Intervention. With the weight of bodies that you have in this unit, just the number of dudes, there's not a lot of units in the game that are going to kill all of the Cadians, and especially if your opponent is trying to do it with some skirmishing units like Jump Back Intercessors, they are not going to kill their way through this unit. So Heroic Intervention from the Cadian Castellan Brick is very powerful because not only are you going to be charging in with 6 Power Fist attacks, as well as anything else you put in the unit, but we can also fall back and shoot afterwards. So at the cost of maybe 10 Cadians, we're going to get the added benefit of a charge plus a pile and consolidate worth of movement. Not only is this really powerful for getting the extra movement, but also you could do this in a couple of different ways in order to deny your opponent's secondaries or get onto primary that your opponent wasn't expecting you to, or getting a sticky on a primary that your opponent was not expecting you to be able to get to in the first place. Now remember, this is not a mechanical how to do. If you are interested in checking out that kind of thing, there are lots of other great resources. I know Tactical Tortoise has one. I know Happy Crumping Wargaming has one. I know Aspect Tactics has one. There's probably a couple other YouTube channels that also have different ways to talk about swing charging, I would strongly recommend going to check out one of those if you want to have a better idea of what this is, and we'll come back and talk about that again in a few minutes. Before we go too far, I do want to talk about the Ogryn Bodyguard and whether or not this is something you want to be including in your lists. The Cadian Castellan Brick is already fairly durable, but an Ogryn Bodyguard nearly guarantees that you'll have models left. A couple good examples is Calgar and 6 Victrix, or Double Gatling Despoiler doesn't kill every model in the unit, especially if you have an Ogryn Bodyguard there to help out. And an added benefit is, of course, the fact that anything with precision is now way less interesting because the Ogryn Bodyguard gives the characters a 4-up Feel No Pain. So the Cadian Castellan and the Cadian Commander end up becoming twice as durable as your opponent might expect them to. And another big thing is that after the activation that killed all the Cadian shock troops, a command squad and Ogryn Bodyguard unit pops out. And I've already done a video on how effective that can be, because having toughness 6 bodies running around that are reviving is something that a lot of people are not necessarily going to be expecting. I do want to take a moment to talk about precision a little bit more here as well, because if precision, especially at range, exists in a way that you have to deal with it, it does change the way you move the Cadian Castellan and the Cadian Commander, because it's very important that they live in order to give the rest of your army access to certain abilities like that fallback and shoot or the cover on objectives. But the Ogryn Bodyguard means that you don't have to be anywhere near as careful in order to make sure that these models are actually going to be surviving, because the 4-up Feel No Pain is going to discourage a lot of players from trying to take them out with all of the precision that they might have. Units like Sicarians and Admech, or a lot of different units in Emperor's Children that just have precision bolted onto a ton of their weapons, are now way less excited about trying to go after the characters that we have in these units. So if you do choose to take the Ogryn Bodyguard, the default way that you're going to be looking to take wounds on all of the models in the unit is you're going to start by killing all the Cadian shock troops. There are some examples where you might want to leave one Cadian shock troop alive and start taking saves on the Cadian command squad, but if you're at the point where you're likely to be taking wounds on the Cadian command squad, you are very likely going to be in a position where you are going to be losing all of the Cadians anyway. Once all the Cadian shock troopers are dead, you can start taking saves on the Castellan. He has 4 wounds, a 5-up normal save, a 5-up invul save, and a 4-up Feel No Pain from the Ogryn Bodyguard. The big reason why you start taking wounds on the Castellan after this is because he will split off into his own individual unit, and he's not very useful on his own. He's mostly useful for the abilities that he gives to the Cadian shock troops, and when the Cadian shock troops are gone, we don't need him nearly as much. After the Castellan is dead, we're going to be taking wounds on the 3 Cadian command squad schmucks. These are the 2 plasma guns and the Master Vox. After that, we'll typically take wounds on the Cadian Commander, who has 3 wounds, a 5-up normal save, and a 4-up Feel No Pain from the Ogryn Bodyguard. Then we'll do the Ogryn Bodyguard, who has 6 wounds, a 4-up invul, and a 6-up Feel No Pain. And then lastly, we're going to have the medic at the end. Now, if you're curious about why this works, there is more to be found in the Command Squad Ogryn Bodyguard, but basically, after the last Cadian shock troop is dead, we are no longer required to start putting wounds on non-character models. As soon as the last Cadian shock troop dies, we can put wounds on any model that we like, even within the same activation. Now, what about Nork? Nork is actually worth considering. He's a bit of a meme, but he actually has melee punch with 6 attacks on 2s at strength 8, AP 1, damage 2 dev wounds, and he does some mortal wounds when you activate the unit. It is important to note that Nork is way less durable than the Ogryn Bodyguard and costs more points. He doesn't have an invul save, but he has a better Feel No Pain. So if you want to go punch things with this unit, he's actually not a bad unit to take. But if you're just trying to survive, or you don't want to spend the extra points on Nork, the Ogryn Bodyguard does basically everything you want anyway. Big thing here, if you do choose to take Nork, check the timing on the mortal wounds. It happens when you select the unit to fight, which is before the unit piles in. So if Nork himself is not in engagement range when you say, I'm going to start piling in with this unit, you do not get to do the mortal wounds. Alright, it's time to start talking about the strategy for this unit and how you're going to be building your lists around it and what you'd actually do with it. The first thing to think about is the second unit is typically better than the first one that you take. As with any SKU that you can take in the game, not all armies are particularly well equipped to deal with them, and a 26 or 27 model unit, if you have the Ogryn Bodyguard, is something that some armies just can't kill efficiently. However, the armies that can do so are going to have to expose one of the few things in their army that can actually do that, and then we're going to kill those things afterwards. So while the first Cadian Castellan Brick might end up going down relatively efficiently, after we kill the thing that killed our Cadians, it's very likely that the second unit is very difficult for our opponent to take down. And so while the first unit might die, the second unit is oftentimes living until the end of the game. The other major thing that we have to think about when we're actually taking these Cadian Castellan Bricks is whether or not we want to put one in reserve. If you're only taking one, it's generally going to be starting on the board. However, if you are taking a second one, there are a lot of matchups and a lot of missions and a lot of deployments where you will think about putting them in reserve. In general, the things you you need to be thinking about and what would trigger you to put them in reserve. 1, if your opponent can just run at you at the top of 1, you can't put it in reserve. 2, if the board is really closed, you're more likely to want to put them in reserve because it's going to be harder to get good rapid ingresses off. And the third thing is if you don't have anything else in reserve like Rough Riders or Scions, having the Cadian Castellan Brick in reserve forces your opponent to screen relatively early on, and it forces them to deal with rapid ingresses that they wouldn't have to do otherwise. We are almost always going to be taking this unit in reserve and using rapid ingress on turn 2 or 3 in order to put it in a position where it is going to be relevant later. Rapid ingress with an Overwatch with 14 sustained plasma shots and anti-detachment bonuses is very powerful. It's something we used to do with Scions all the time. But we also are going to be rapid ingressing to set up charges with our own unit, get heroic interventions into potentially our other Cadian unit, or generally just be pseudo-Scions in general. While it is in reserve, we want to be looking for opportunities to do a couple of things. The first one is we want to be looking to set up charges into vehicles or transports in order to prevent our opponent from moving in ways that they want to. However, on some deployments, the side objectives are going to be within 6 inches of the board edge, which means that we can come in and sticky things from rapid ingress if we weren't already holding them previously. But again, swing charges, swing charges, swing charges. We want to be looking for ways to swing this giant tail to move this unit all around that is relatively durable and annoying for our opponent to kill. We want to be putting it in their face. We want to be making it difficult for them to kill it because they're going to be at -1, or they can't shoot at it because it's engaged, or it's going to be stopping their movement in places that they don't like. And the other big thing to think about is the melee from this unit is not bad. It's not exceptional, but it's not bad. You have a Power Fist hitting on 3s, coming from the Cadian Castellan. You have a Power Fist hitting on 4s from the Cadian Commander. If you have Nork or the Ogryn Bodyguard with a Ripper Gun, you're going to be bonking a couple of cultists or maybe a Marine to death. And then you have many other dudes just punching people. You actually have pretty decent odds to kill 5 Marines in melee, especially if you're in Grizzled, where you get access to the reroll once to hit and sometimes to wound. However, you don't generally take this unit to go actively looking to do damage in melee unless you're taking Nork. But don't forget to remind your opponent, if they're trying to consolidate into this unit, that you do have 2 Power Fists and the Ogryn Bodyguard who will actually kill a couple more Marines if they consolidate into you. Again, I will reiterate here that coming in from strategic reserves in order to sticky your score primary if your opponent didn't threaten the objective enough, there are not a lot of units that can one phase just kill all the Cadian Shock Troopers off a unit. So if you're going to lose like 10 of them by showing this unit to a Vindicator, but you're going to be able to sticky the objective in return, that's generally going to be a worthwhile trade. But the other one is if you can come in from reserve and swap 3 to 5 units to take cover on your opponent's turn, it really messes with the math for your opponent. Or you can use this unit from reserve to hop in. You have moved all of your units on your own turn, and then this unit comes in and gives orders to everything. So if you move your first Cadian Brick, and then you swap them over to first rank fire, second rank fire, or you move your Rough Riders, and then you swap them over to fixed bayonets, there are a lot of cool things you can actually do with this unit in order to put a lot of pressure on your opponent. One other big thing to think about is going to be very board dependent, but the first unit is typically going to be sticking your home on turn 1 and then moving to go touch your natural if your opponent can't deal with it. But this unit can screen out your entire backfield all by itself. It's generally going to be more powerful if you can push it forward into the midboard earlier in the game, but it is one of the things where, because it is such a large unit, you should use that to your advantage to make sure your opponent is not going to be able to move in places that they want to. Before I let you guys go, I do want to spend a couple of minutes talking about taking the Cadian Castellan versus Ursula Creed, because they are competing in slot. We generally want to take this 20 Cadian Brick, we generally want to give it a leader, so we have to make a decision. Do we want the Castellan or do we want Creed? And the Castellan is going to give more effective combat tools to the unit. You have the better Overwatch because you get access to Sustain, which does proc off of those 6s. You get Fallback and Shoot, so you are less susceptible to being tagged. And you have a couple of Power Fists, so the melee is going to be relevant. To contrast this, Creed generates a lot of CP, but tends to hang back because she is not as capable in combat. Take Aim will average the same damage as Sustain because +1 to hit and Sustain are about the same, but it does not work in Overwatch. She also costs 30 points more, and one of the interesting things is 2 orders opens up some interesting combos. You can move, and duty and honor something in order to take an objective that you would not otherwise. You can give first rank fire, second rank fire, and take aim, or first rank fire, second rank fire, and target weak spot. So it is a higher utility unit, even if it doesn't have the same kind of damage output. In general, if you're trying to play a game that is only going to be 2 or 3 battle rounds, you should take the Castellan because it is better at playing the game on turn 2. Or if you're like me, and you want that powerful wave 3 who comes out towards the end of the game in order to secure your primary or get that bottom of turn scoring at the very end of the game, and you want to play a game that is going to play 5 battle rounds, Creed is going to be more your style. But it is also worth noting that this is not a one or the other. You can choose to take one of each. The Cadian Castellan Brick is still going to be powerful from reserves, even if you have Ursa Creed on the board as your wave 3. But at that point, you're going to be competing with things like Rough Riders or Scions as things that want to be coming out from reserve already at the same time. If you're playing in Recon Element as well, it is worth noting that Nemo has been playing 2 bricks with Cadian Castellans and command squads, 1 brick with Ursa Creed and a command squad, and then a 4th Cadian brick with just a Castellan as one of his reserve units. So there are ways to mix and match. In general, if you're going to be taking 1 brick of 20 Cadians, it's oftentimes worthwhile to take a 2nd brick of 20 Cadians. You don't have to, it's a lot of points, but it is a tested and proven way in order to have success on the competitive table. As we tune out, I do want to give a couple of big shout outs, of course, to Wesley St. Hines and Gustavo de Sousa as 2 of the major pioneers of this style of play. If you have questions or comments, please let me know down in the comments below. There's always lots more to be said about these units, and I can't fit it all in all of these guides. At this point, as a good YouTuber, it's probably the best time to say you should like, comment, and subscribe to the video. And I think there's like a bell down there with the notifications and all that fun stuff. My name has been Joshua Joushi Howard, and we'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.